Thank you, Mr. Rob Edwards, for your kind donation and generosity. I can't wait to hear you speak tonight, and I am going to now introduce Joan Alessi to the podium. If you could please come on, Joan.
Thank you, and congratulations to everyone who is here to celebrate Rob and our students and our tutors and our organization. And your generosity is amazing. I'm kind of shaking right now because we've not done that auction before, and we had our students speak, and it's just such a great event, and I'm appreciating all of you for being here and being a part of it. So, as you know, my name is Joan Alessi. I won't take too long because we want to get to Rob. We know that. But I will tell you that I've had a couple of volunteer roles in supporting the Oakland Literacy Council, going back as far as 2016, when I knocked on their door and said, could you please let me come in and be a tutor? So I've been a tutor, and then I said, ooh, I'm a professional facilitator, and I love doing stuff like this. Can I do your training for you? Oh, okay, all right. Oh, and I'd like to rewrite part of that training. Can you let me do some instructional design for you? Oh, you will? Okay, well, I'll do that. And on we went. And it was a great match of talent and support from the organization to bring what I could to volunteer in a couple different capacities. And for a short period of time, I was also on the board, so I got to be a part of the great board and what they were doing to bring this to our community. But now I consider myself as just cheerleader at large, and I'm sure after tonight you all feel the same. Cheerleader at large, are you with me? Yeah. All right. But tonight in specific, my role, look, I'm doing this without my glasses on, so pretty good so far, right? Tonight, my role is to introduce our guest speaker, who is an exceptional talent in the entertainment industry, and on a personal level, a very cherished friend, Mr. Rob Edwards. I'm not done. Hang in there. So just a little bit about Rob, and then we're going to give the floor to him and let him do his thing. Rob is a gifted storyteller, and his writing journey really began when he was little, and he entered Cranbrook in, I believe, 6th grade, right? 7th grade, okay. So that's where where he developed his creative foundation before. Up higher, like that? Woo, that's really loud. Okay, so his writing journey began when he entered Cranbrook in the 7th grade. And that's where he developed his creative foundation before pursuing formal film studies at Syracuse University. And after completing his education, he made a bold move all the way to Los Angeles to begin his career and marry his lovely wife, Michelle, and became a dad to his 2 handsome sons, Jay and Sammy. Yep. So Rob and I personally go way back. He's been a friend of my husband Bill's since their days as students at Cranbrook. And on one of Rob's recent visits back to this area, he described a project to me with such great enthusiasm and passion and excitement that I was immediately thinking that he would be a very interesting and thoughtful speaker here for Ex Libris. As a matter of fact, it was at this time last year, at the end of the event, that Judy was going up the stairs because she had her knee bandaged up and she was trying to beat the crowd at the end of the evening. And I trailed right behind her and said, Judy got this great idea for next year's speaker. And she was like, really? We haven't even closed the doors on this one, Joan. So anyways, I wanted to bring this idea forward, and so I was able to talk to Lori about it, and then we kind of got the ball rolling with Sue, and here we are tonight for Ex Libris, and we'll hear him speak about that project in a minute, and it's his graphic novel, as you saw, is Defiant. But let me tell you that in the early days of juggling his career, marriage, and parenthood, Rob developed deep television roots. And he helped shape the comedic landscape as a writer on In Living Color. How many of you remember that show? Yeah. It was a groundbreaking sketch comedy series that launched countless careers, including Rob's. and became a cultural phenomenon. He then brought his storytelling expertise to the golden age of sitcoms, contributing to the massive success of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You remember that one? Yep. And also Rock. Now, these shows not only entertained millions, but also really pushed the boundaries and sparked important conversations about race, class, and family. But Rob's career extends way beyond the small screen. He pushed out even further into film, and he's worked on some of the most visually stunning and imaginative projects in cinema, from the swashbuckling adventures of Treasure Planet. How many of you have seen Treasure Planet? Yep, right? And the enchanting animation of The Princess and the Frog. Mm-hmm. And the epic scope of King of Kings. Yep. To the high-stakes superhero action of Captain America: Brave New World. Yeah. So Rob has really proven his ability to craft compelling narratives across virtually every genre and format, from television to film and now to graphic novel. You know, think about this. There's something really very, very special about having friends who inspire you with their work while also being genuinely good people to spend time with. I hope you enjoy listening to Rob speak tonight, and that by the end of the evening, you'll want to call him a friend as well. Please help me in welcoming our friend, Rob Edwards.
Joan didn't tell me that she would be giving the introduction tonight. And I'm sure that was my wife that provided 8 of the most embarrassing pictures of me ever. I apologize. I'd like to thank OLC and Ex Libris, Sue Klunk, Heidi Heidquist, Joan, of course, and Judy Lindstrom for this wonderful event. This is an amazing organization. Joan was the one that first told me about it, and I was like, I'm all in. I'll get on a plane, let's go. So that's just fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody who bought the book. It's you're in for a treat. The biggest treat is that I wrote one. That's the biggest surprise to anybody who knows me. Yeah, it's about a guy named Robert Smalls. Now, Robert Smalls was a slave who, when he was 23 years old, he was commissioned to, all slaves had to kind of fight for the Confederacy during that time. And he was working on a ship that would basically transport munitions from one place to another for the Confederacy. Now, one night, he waited for the 3 white crew members to go off to shore, and he and the other 9 black members met their families in Charleston Bay, commandeered the boat, got past 5 military checkpoints, disguised as the captain, giving all the secret signals, and they surrendered the ship to the Union Navy. He quickly became rich because it was loaded with weapons. He started a railroad. He started a publishing house. He ran for Congress 5 times and won. And the greatest tragedy is that we don't know who he is. The greatest accomplishment, I think the most superheroic thing that he ever did, 2 of them. One was when the slave owner's wife came back to the house. She had Alzheimer's. She didn't know any place other than the house that she'd grown up in. By that time, Robert Smalls had bought the house. So she came in, and Robert Smalls welcomed her back into the house, into her old bedroom, where she lived out the rest of her life. One thing. 2 is he died of old age. And at that time, he had a bounty on his head because he was the most famous black person in the world. P.T. Barnum had him giving speeches. He was everywhere. And so, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine from Cranbrook presented me with his story. As he was telling it, I'm Googling on the other screen and saying, like, wow, this guy's amazing. Why isn't there a movie about this? And he says, well, yeah, that's why I'm talking to you. I said, okay, geez, okay. If we're going to do it, we have to have incredible IP. We have to have a really good book to base it on. Having written Treasure Planet, of course, based on Robert Louis Stevenson's classic, and Princess and the Frog, which is basically a grim fairy tale that we evolved. I knew that we had to have a best-selling, award-winning book. And they said, hey, Rob, will you write it? And I said, yeah, sure, yeah, right, exactly, I will. Not knowing anything about what I was getting into. And fortunately, it was the #1 selling book on Amazon. And thank you. Yes, and we just got notified that we've been nominated for an Image Award. So that season, I think, is going to be pretty fun for us. Now, nobody would be more surprised, I thought, than my 7th grade remedial English teacher, Fran Dagbovi. And when I told her about it, I said, hey, I wrote a book. And she just kind of nodded and smiled. I said, yeah, but you do remember I took remedial English in 7th grade. And she said, yeah, but you passed. And I think that's the reason why we're all here, right? Is that you can go from anywhere to anywhere. One of the amazing things about Robert Smalls is that he was so charismatic and well-spoken that P.T. Barnum, as I said, had him giving speeches to sold-out crowds. And which was great because he was a very eloquent speaker. He was magnificent in front of crowds. And but his frustration was because slaves were not allowed to learn how to read. He was illiterate. And he had 2 tutors. Once he got some money and moved into his house, he had a tutor in the morning and a tutor at night to teach him how to read. It was that important to him. And that's, I think, what you guys are up to, which is magnificent. Yes, please give yourself some room. So tonight, I'm going to share with you my passion for reading. It's what I read and why. And I hope that the things that inspire me will inspire you in turn. So first, the why. First, you got to start with my dad. And my dad was an immigrant from Guyana. He came here, worked hard. He was apparently, what he would say is that there's this newspaper article that says, Berbice boy tops the colony, which means that of all the people in Guyana, he got the highest SAT scores in the country. He came here, he became a doctor. He was the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. And he, when I was a kid, was grooming me to be a doctor. He would take me on rounds, all kinds of things. He put me in Cranbrook. And when it was time to graduate, he said, okay, great, I got a plan. You're going to go to med school. You're going to, you know where this is going. You're going to go to med school. You're going to intern. He was a chief of staff at Hudson Hospital. So you're going to intern there. You're going to go into practice with me. It's going to be fantastic. I got it all planned out. And I said, hey, Dad, I got a better idea. I'm going to go to Hollywood and write jokes. And he said, over my dead body. And so we made a deal that he would give me 9 months after I graduated to get rid of this foolishness. And if I ever asked him for money, I'd immediately have to take my MCATs, and I would be off to medical school. So I had 9 months. I looked it up, and it takes 4 years to break into the entertainment industry. I did not have much time. So from a freshman year, I started trying to break into Hollywood. And so I wound up, my father was not going to give me any great advice, so I just wrote everybody. Everybody that I wrote that was a great writer in any kind of capacity, I would write them a letter, and I asked them one question. What would you advise your 19-year-old self to do? And they gave me 4 pieces of advice. They said, write as many screenplays as you can, read as many screenplays as you can, move out to Hollywood as soon as you can, and the 4th, more importantly, read as many biographies as you possibly can. Now, thanks to Fran Dagbovi, I could speed read, take good notes, and remember a lot of stuff. So that got me into my passion now, which is the stories of writers that I truly admire. And here we go. So I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you a few of the gems that I picked up along the way. And we'll make what I call inspiration soup while we're at it. First, the stock, right? You know how people say, oh, he comes from good stock. Well, so let's talk about these guys' childhoods. And many of the stories start from humble beginnings, and few more humble than this. Now, his own elementary school teacher described him as the second dumbest kid in the class. As a child, This man's father physically abused him, often with a hammer. When he was 14 years old, before he realized he was strong enough to overpower his father and stop him. He was bullied at school because the kids thought his hobby was unmanly. Other kids were amazed by his flipbooks that he would draw in the margins of his textbooks. It turns out that this kid wasn't slow. He just loved drawing and imagining the world that he was going to create. Because Walter Elias Disney would rather sit in the corner and draw than live in the world that he around him. Yes. As for me, I'm thankful that he did because his name has appeared on my checks for about 20 years now. So I'm thrilled. In a parallel story, while studying at Dartmouth College, Theodore Geisel also liked to draw. He also told funny stories for the school's humor magazine until he was suspended for drinking gin during Prohibition. He got around this punishment by writing stories under his middle name, Seuss. While getting his doctorate in philosophy at Oxford, the girl sitting next to him peeked at his drawings and convinced him to stop becoming an English teacher and follow his joy and become a professional artist. And so she became his wife, and he became Dr. Seuss. Back to Disney. He and his two brothers were children, working for their father, delivering newspapers. But their father would keep most of their money. And it was so frustrating to the other two brothers that they ran away from home. Alone with his father doubled down on the abuse until, as I mentioned, at 14, he overpowered him. As he held his father's arms, he describes in his book, he realized for the first time that he was stronger than the man who had abused him since birth. But there was also sadness as he watched his father weep as he realized the same thing. Walt Disney was never abused again. By the way, all these biographies refer to other biographies. It's really amazing that everybody reads everybody else's biographies. And in this case, Disney was very much a fan of John D. Rockefeller, of course, the son of Devil Bill, bigamist and con artist, who was thought to be crazy until he announced to the world that he was going to revolutionize the oil industry at the age of 23. I wonder how that went. So more stock. Francis Ford Coppola, who gave us The Godfather and the Apocalypse Now, his origins were similarly grim. His father was a failure who told his son that there was only room for one genius in the family. What chance do you have? George Lucas, who wrote Star Wars, Indiana Jones, was considered to be a juvenile delinquent and a constant underachiever. His father wanted him to work with him at his office supply store. So George says no, and his father was as disappointed as mine was. Quentin Tarantino, who gave us Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. He was named after a Burt Reynolds character in the TV show Gunsmoke. His father left before he was born. His mother was sarcastic and dismissive about his career ambitions. She couldn't afford a babysitter, so she would take him on dates to watch adult movies. Quentin would sit quietly and listen to his mother and her dates talk about the movies. And what should have traumatized him actually inspired him. The other parents, however, would not let Quentin talk to their kids for fear that they would want to see the same movies that Quentin was talking about. Like George Lucas, Quentin's classmates thought he was slow. His teacher told him that, no, Quentin's not slow. Quentin reads at my level because he was so interested in biography that he had taught himself to read at a higher level. So far, we have the call, big dreams, do something that everyone else thinks is crazy, followed by an obsession, desire to prove them wrong. Confidence before competence. There's a great African proverb that I learned when I was writing Princess and the Frog. It says, pray, then move your feet. James Cameron, who wrote Avatar, Titanic, Terminator, and Aliens, was from a family of scientists who wanted him to follow in their footsteps. Of course, he disappointed them. He described himself as an inventor first and a filmmaker second. Christopher Nolan, who gave us The Dark Knight, Oppenheimer, and Inception, his father was a creative director at an ad agency, and his mother was an English teacher from America. He was so enthralled by Ridley Scott's movies and Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and of course Star Wars. and my favorite, the 1977 TV special, The Making of Star Wars, that starred R2-D2 and C-3PO, that taught us how magic was made. And he, like I, embraced that. At 7 years old, Nolan borrowed his father's 8mm camera and made an animated films and shorts, including Space Wars, which was, of course, a copy of Star Wars. I did the same thing in my garage. I blew up a TIE fighter and made myself almost deaf because you're not supposed to make explosions in a closed garage. Not a good idea. So anyway, we've got our stock. Now the second part, spice. Education. Walt Disney set off on his own, and he said he had no idea where he'd go, but he was absolutely certain that he would get there. He didn't know how to make a living drawing, but he did know that some local cartoonists were teaching night classes. So he took their classes, got the information he needed, and became a professional newspaper cartoonist. When World War I broke out, Walt lied about his age, worked as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross, and eventually drew cartoons for the war effort. When he was asked about it later, he said he wasn't interested in the war, he was interested in the adventure. Interestingly, Dr. Seuss also made animated propaganda during World War II. After the war ended, Walt's job also ended and he was broke. On the bus home from the war, Walt met another high school dropout who could draw, Ub Iwerks. They decided to turn tragedy into opportunity and start an animation company together. Walt was so confident that he would succeed that he worked on various variations of what would become his iconic signature that shows up in the beginning of all my movies and, of course, on the top of my checks. Unfortunately, when you're doing something that nobody else has ever done, there aren't a lot of books that teach you how to do it. So Walt found one book of animation in the Kansas City Library, and he and Ub Iwerks decided to teach themselves how to animate. Quentin Tarantino has often said he didn't go to film school, he went to films. When he was 7 years old, one of his mother's friends moved in with them, and he was an aspiring screenwriter who introduced Quentin to blaxploitation. Yay, yay. Quentin was one of the only white person and the only child in the theater, but it left an indelible mark on him. On a personal note, I also grew up with blaxploitation and kung fu movies, and there was a theater about a block and a half from where I grew up, and the thing was you would buy two boxes of popcorn, one to eat and the other to throw at the screen. Quentin Tarantino was so enthralled with a 1977 movie called Rolling Thunder. So when he was 14, he called everyone in the phone book with the name of the director. Finally, somebody answered. And Quentin lied and said, "Hey, I'm writing a book about directors. Can I talk to you?" And the guy said yes. So Quentin went over to his house with a tape recorder in hand and asked the guy every question that he could. Quentin, of course, thought that the guy would only talk to him for an hour, so he only brought an hour of tape. And so for the 3 hours that it took to talk to this guy, he continued to turn the tape over and erase the previous half hour of whatever he'd had. But at the end of it, he had an education in film. Later, he lied about his age again and got work as an usher at the Pussycat Theater in Torrance, which I don't think you're supposed to do. After that, he worked at Video Archives, a movie rental store, where he kept meticulous notes of all the movies that he saw, and he quickly became the guy you want to talk to if you want to talk about esoteric films. And that started to grow his community. Christopher Nolan didn't go to film school. Instead, he studied English at University College in London. He started a film and TV society so he could watch films with his friends. And on weekends, he'd use the school's equipment to make movies, and he taught himself how to make movies. One of them was the film that would eventually make him famous. One of my favorite stories is about self-education, comes from James Cameron. And James thought he couldn't get into film school. He drove a truck for a living. But fortunately, he had access to the grad school of a film school. And what he did was he would go and read the dissertations of all the students. So he would copy these 300-page dissertations. He figured that whatever they had learned in their 4 years was in those dissertations, and he would just learn that way. He quickly became an expert. One person who did go to film school was George Lucas, although it was entirely by accident. In high school, all he wanted to do was race cars. But right before graduation, he got into a terrible accident and spent a lot of time in hospital thinking about his life. He went to Modesto Junior College to study anthropology and psychology. After school, his best friend wanted moral support while he took the entrance exam to USC. With nothing else to do while he waited, George also took the test and got in. He followed his passion for art and photography and gravitated to what he thought was a course in photography, but it turned out it was cinematography. He had accidentally enrolled in the film school that he would eventually donate $175 million to. At USC, George was in his element. Along with other students from his school, students from UCLA, NYU, and others, the group formed a group that was called the Dirty Dozen, and that includes many of the iconic filmmakers that you see in their movies today. One of the others was a guy named Steven Spielberg, who basically educated himself by putting on a suit when he was a kid. He was a teenager. Puts on a suit and walks through the gates of Universal Studios, and basically sits on sets, asks people a lot of questions, and that's how he learned how to make films. Also at USC, George didn't give up his reputation for being a breaker of rules. His first film, Look at Life, was supposed to be short, silent, and animated. It was none of those. It was a collage of photographs and sound that the teachers were very upset about until it won 47 awards, and they kind of left him alone. Now the third ingredient of the soup, meat, that first job. Back to Disney. The two high school dropouts, Walt Disney and L.B. Works, started with a 1-minute animated short to show before feature films. His margins were so thin that he ate beans out of a can and showered once a week at the the YMCA. Eventually, he sold his car to make enough money to move to Hollywood. He borrowed a suit and sold a series called Alice's Wonderland. Those shorts would make him just enough money to live on. Oops. Quentin Tarantino worked as an actor, spent his nights writing, and eventually wrote the first screenplay, Reservoir Dogs. But nobody wanted to buy it unless he took up the infamous ear-cutting scene. But Quentin Tarantino stuck to his guns. He sold the script for True Romance instead for $50,000 and tried to use that to finance his film, but he still couldn't get it made. Finally, a friend of a friend had a yoga instructor who worked with Harvey Keitel, and that person got the script to Harvey Keitel. He signed in for the movie, and the movie's budget doubled from $600,000 to $1.2 million overnight. During that time, he also sold Natural Born Killers, which was rewritten to the point where he never talks about it in interviews. But he also did numerous rewrites, including Crimson Tide, The Rock, and believe it or not, It's Pat. His next movie, Pulp Fiction, was considered to be a disaster by his friends. They told him that they had notes, and they would talk to him when he got back from his next film festival. That film festival was Cannes, where Pulp Fiction played to packed crowds and standing ovations. It won the festival, and the notes suddenly disappeared. Christopher Nolan and his brother, Jonathan, raised enough money to make a small independent thriller called Memento. The story of a man with amnesia who used his tattoos to remember in order to avenge the death of his wife. The story is told in reverse order, and everybody told him it was a mistake, but Christopher stuck to his guns, and the movie was a hit. It was also nominated for Best Screenplay, both Oscars and Golden Globes, which is uncanny for a person's first script. George Lucas, his first film was THX 1138, which was a cold, dark remake of a short student film. People told him to change it, and George stuck to his guns, and the movie was a flop. He started a company with Francis Ford Coppola that went out of business. Unlike Disney, who could draw, or any of the others who could write, Lucas hated writing, and by his words, the only reason he directed was because it made him the only person on the set that nobody could tell him what to do. With Coppola's urging, he went back to his roots and decided to write a low-budget movie that was about his misspent youth in Modesto. He didn't want to write, so he hired a writer and then fired him and wrote it himself. The movie was American Graffiti in 1973. Even that movie was impossible to finance, but it made $115 million at the box office, and all eyes were on George to write his next movie. And we know what that is. When James Cameron was a teenager, he had a dream about bioluminescent plants and flying lizards. And when he woke up, he drew a picture of his dream. And decades later, that became the basis for a movie called Avatar. Now, Avatar came out in the same weekend as a really wonderful movie called The Princess and the Frog. But I'm not bitter. That's the key to my... Before that, he was driving a truck. He got this screenplay for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Citizen Kane. Later, he got a job making models for cheap Roger Corman movies. On his hubris, he quickly worked his way up to art director and then second unit director, and he talked himself into a job directing Piranha 2. When everybody told him he was over his head, he stuck to his guns and was fired in 5 days. As for me, I worked summers at my father's office, and so I knew all of his assistants. After college, my plan had worked. I was a professional Hollywood writer for 4 months after graduation. So we were saved from that. Otherwise, thank you. Yeah, otherwise you'd be hearing a speech of your friend, the colonoscopy. And I think we could all thank the world for that. My confidence had turned into competence, but I still regretted that I had disappointed my father. And one day I told one of his assistants, I think Dad, I don't know. And she said, have you ever been to the office lately? I said, well, no. Why should I? Come to the office right now. I came to the office, and there in the waiting room was a wall with all of my TV guides and whatever magazines and pictures of me, and very fun. It was like, okay, good. He couldn't tell me himself, but he made a wall. And that leads us to the fourth and final most important ingredient, patience. 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 Back to James Cameron. He goes back to basics. Like his hero, George Lucas, he hated writing. The only thing worse than writing was other people's writing. Out of despair, the 27-year-old James Cameron writes a screenplay for Terminator. It cost $6 million to make and made $78 million at the box office. His next film was Alien, which cost $18 million and made $131 million at the box office. Avatar, of course, cost $257 million and made $3 billion and swamped a really, really good Disney animated musical that came out on the same day. So we left Disney and iWorks on cloud 9. They were making a living, making their animated Alice's Wonderland shorts, until the distributor sold him out, and he was broke again. Disney did what he always did when times were tough. He drew and drew and drew. And on the train ride back, his train ride of shame back to Kansas City, he drew a mouse that he called Mortimer. He showed it to his wife. He says, this is Mortimer the mouse. And his wife said, yeah, it's a terrible name. Like, well, give him a better name. It's Mickey. And then it was born. When Walt suggested that the new animated shorts would be talkies, that the mouse would talk, people tried to talk him out of it. They said it was unnatural, peculiar, and off-putting. But Walt stuck to his guns, and Steamboat Willie became an instant classic. Studios offered him a deal to become an animator, but virtually penniless Walt said no, he had bigger things in mind. He immediately wanted to go bigger. He took out personal loans and made the first animated feature in history, Snow White. He couldn't get the artists he wanted, so he taught people how to animate. He mortgaged everything. And when the movie was done, the banker came to watch the film. He was silent the whole way through. And Walt just sweated through the entire thing. Walks the guy to his car, and the guy finally said the first words, "You're going to make a lot of money." And he was right. The 1939 classic Snow White broke box office records and became a classic. In fact, you had to reserve seat 3 weeks in advance to see it. Walt was 37 years old. But he was broke again when his workers went on strike a few years later. And then rich beyond anyone's dreams when his dream, Disneyland, opened in 1955. After winning the Oscar for Best Screenplay, Christopher Nolan still couldn't get a job. Fortunately, Steven Soderbergh, who gave us Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, Aaron Brockovich, and Traffic, saw Memento and vouched for him to direct Insomnia, which established him as a genuine auteur. He explored many films before pitching the idea for the origins of Batman. That movie became Batman Begins, which put him on the map. So Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet, Oppenheimer. Incredible. But you could always see the potential in his first film, Following. As for George Lucas, after American Graffiti, he wanted to make a science fiction thriller. But he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so he reluctantly sat down and wrote his own, an homage to the film he loves as a child. All but one studio turned him down, but Alan Ladd, who ran 20th Century Fox at the time, liked American Graffiti and took a chance on it. The Incredible Deal is stuff of dreams. That's a subject for another talk. But suffice it to say that Star Wars became the highest grossing movie of all time. The juvenile delinquent from Modesto who broke the rules and believed in himself had become an institution. And the world was saved from yet another office supply executive. Okay, so the soup is cooling. Let's talk about what we've learned. Stock. You can get to anywhere from anywhere. Confidence before competence. Confidence precedes ability. See it, believe it, achieve it. My father used to say, fake it till you feel it. Other people say, fake it till you make it. I like my dad's version better. Spice. Education is everywhere. There's a saying at Pixar, be a film goer first, be a filmmaker second. Write your own favorite movie, and if you're bored by your own writing, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. I got my first job at Disney trying to out-geek everybody in the room, and when I started working there, I realized that the whole place was like film school on steroids. Everybody knew as much as me, if not more. Everybody there had memorized every movie down to the dialogue. Even the guys at Marvel had memorized every single comic book and every action movie in history. Magnus Carlsen, arguably the world's greatest chess player, entered a competition in chess trivia just on a lark, and he won it. Kobe Bryant had an encyclopedic recall of every game Michael Jordan had ever played. He mimicked his mannerisms, dressed like it. Michael Jordan, for his part, memorized everything that Dr. J had ever done. Tom Cruise watches a movie every day without fail. When I was working with Chris Rock, he could recite word for word every Dave Chappelle routine. When I was a kid, I used to watch the dads drive a new car onto the lawn, take it apart and see how it worked. A lot of people do that with radios, take them apart and find out. Some people would do that with recipes. Well, filmmakers do that with films. We read and we study. The meat. The term stick to your guns was tracked back to an 18th century command to keep soldiers attending their posts and not giving up the fight. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you, then you win. Who said that? Gandhi. Only dead fish go with the flow. It's one of my favorite quotes. I was once at dinner with John Landis, who gave us Blues Brothers and American Werewolf, and he asked me what kinds of movies I wanted to write. And I told him that if a black person flies and says something funny, I want to be the guy who wrote it. He laughed. I stuck to my guns. A few years later, I wrote a Marvel movie about a black guy who says funny things and flies. Once you realize you can be great at anything, you have an obligation to work tirelessly, to doggedly do what it is you've been put on earth to do. The only way we can guarantee failure is to stop trying. Last story. On the day I saw the wall in my father's office, I asked him about it when I got home. He walked me into his office and opened the drawer to his desk. It was full of short stories he'd written, articles he'd written for Sports Illustrated. And he told me about the time that he told his father that he wanted to be a writer. My grandfather told him his version of Over My Dead Body. And my father followed his wishes and became a doctor. All that time, I've been living his dreams. In the end, it's all about the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, thanks, right? Great story. It's all about the pursuit of happiness, and so I'll leave you with the words of George Lucas. He says, I've discovered along the way that happiness is pleasure and happiness is joy. Pleasure is short-lived. It lasts an hour, a minute, a month. It peaks and then it goes down. But the next time you want to get to that same peak, you have to work twice as hard. On the other hand, there's joy. Joy doesn't go as high as pleasure in terms of emotional reaction, but it stays with you. Joy is something you can recall. Pleasure you can't. You'll never relive the moment that you bought your first car. That's it. It's the highest peak. Yes, you can get 3 Ferraris or a new Gulfstream jet. That's Lucas talking. But maybe you'll get close, but you have to keep going, and eventually you run out. So if you're trying to sustain that level of peak pleasure, you're doomed. Pleasure is purely self-centered. It's all about your pleasure. It's about you. It's a selfish and self-centered emotion. It's created by the self-centered motive of greed. But joy lasts forever. Joy is compassion. Joy is giving yourself to something else or someone else, a higher purpose. It's subtle, but it's much more powerful. If you get hung up on pleasure, you're doomed. If you pursue joy, you'll find everlasting happiness. Joy is the feeling you get when you see a world that you've changed by helping people learn how to read and introducing them to the wonders of stories like these. Thank you. Thank you so much. Judy, thank you.